probably need no introduction, but here we have Darren Henley, Chief Executive, Laura Dyer, Deputy Chief Executive, and Richard Russell, Chief Operating Officer from the Arts Council. Now, we took questions in advance from the audience to help direct this conversation. At one point, we had toyed with the idea of getting you all up to ask them, but time is not with us there. So I will be asking your questions and crediting them to squeeze more in. So let's make a start. There's a huge amount to get through. Darren, this has been your first NPO process as Arts Council CEO, and you signalled this would be new and improved type portfolio from the outset. So I want to know how you think it's been, how have you avoided just funding the usual suspects, and have you achieved everything that you set out to do?
Well, I think what we've got is more arts for more people in more places, and that was one of the things that we really set out to do. 800 or so organisations, 180 new organisations, so some real change there. And what we wanted to do was to really identify ways of funding new, younger and more diverse organisations. And I think one of the things I would say is I'm a passionate believer in art and culture up and down the country, right across the country. All of our areas of the country are equal in my mind, and I've hopefully met, this place is a bit of a nightmare for me because I've met 900 people I've met over the last 3 years, all out of context, all in one room, and all of them come up to me and say, "Hi, it's great, we saw you last Tuesday," or "We saw you 3 months ago," or whatever. And it's been really, really important to me. And I saw the dogs as well, just last week. Just last week we were in Newham seeing the dogs. And it's really important to me that we have that, and we have that authenticity. It's a journey of travel, though. We're not there yet, and I think it would be wrong to say we've got a perfect portfolio. We'll always learn, we'll always grow, we'll always do things differently.
Okay, well, thank you. Picking up on that, Richard, how do you make sure that you get the balance right in terms of the administrative ask to the NPOs?
I think one of the things I would say about that is that last time we treated everybody the same. And that was really the feedback that we got when we talked to people about how we should work in terms of the portfolio going forward. So as you all know, what we've done is we've kind of created these bands where we have different expectations for different sized grants and different sized organisations. So clearly we'll be making more demands of those organisations that are receiving the most, and we'll be making less demand of the people who are receiving the least in terms of grant funding from the Arts Council. I think one of the things that's important for all organisations is a commitment to providing really good quality data back to us. We heard this morning from the Minister about the importance of the evidence base and being able to tell the story about the impact of the public funding that we are giving in the arts across the country. So making sure that we really get good quality data back is going to be really important, no matter what size of organisation you are.
Okay, thank you. Well, Laura, I have a question for you from Dr. Jude Gosling, who is the Artistic Director at Together 2012, Disability Arts, Culture and Human Rights, who would like to know, how will you work with NPOs to motivate them to achieve excellence in every area of their work? And too often NPOs seem prepared to settle for doing the legal minimum, or indeed less, when it comes to diversity and inclusion. With this new portfolio, are you going to be tougher on some NPOs than ever before?
I mean, I think we've heard today an enormous amount about the importance of that inclusive approach and that kind of diverse work at the heart of what everyone does. And actually, I think we see a motivation from organisations to do that. It was central to our whole national portfolio approach. At the very beginning, we strived to kind of have that lens when we looked at constructing the portfolio. So all of you here are here because you were able to convince us that that was important and critical to you. I think the action is what we want to work with you to see now, and to see that real shift. And as we've discussed today, it's absolutely about equality action plans and that kind of sense of how your organisation is constructed and works, but also it is putting that diversity at the heart of the creative programme. And we will, as you know, all be looking at creative case ratings as we move forward in the monitoring regime, and therefore kind of getting that right and getting that real sense of action from your commitment that you made in your applications is what we'll be really working with you on.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Diversity is something that has come up a lot in the questions that were submitted, unsurprisingly, and it's certainly been a flavour of discussion today. So a question to Darren, well, several questions to Darren, and I'll try and summarise them into one. Anthony Roberts from Colchester Arts Centre asked if class could be considered as a barrier to inclusion. Tony Butler from Museum and Art Gallery The Strand picked up on the same point and asked what organisations should do to develop a more broadly based audience and participation. Where Deborah Lincoln and Bridget Lamour, Chair and Chief Executive of Watford Palace Theatre, asked about gender representation on boards, and there were another couple of anonymous questions that came in and asked about board representation, diversity of workforces and programming. So key themes that we know have come out today. It's a lot to unpack, so perhaps I'll summarise it as, how can the Arts Council actually make a significant impact on the diversity of the sector?
Well, I think you have to judge us by how we behave, and also by how the quality of the conversations we have with the people we invest in. Hopefully today we've shown with the diversity of the people who've taken part here how important we see this. Somebody did say to me at lunchtime, oh, you're telling us a lot of the things that we already know about diversity, and my challenge back will be, well, you're not all doing it yet, so we need to get better, and we will continue to remind you of that. We as an organisation also need to be better at it, so we challenge ourselves on that every day as well. I think the question around diversity of socioeconomic background is a really important one. I'm really keen that as we move forward, we invest in the art that actually reflects, and the cultural organisations, the museums, the libraries, the arts organisations, the individual artists, that reflect the work of all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds right across the country. I don't think there is one set of people who should be over-invested in. I think there should be equality of investment over time, and I'm very keen that we signal that as we go forward to the next portfolio round. I know we're just starting about that, but in a typical Arts Council way, we're already planning for 2022 onwards, and we're already having quite serious conversations about that. I'm already planning for our strategy from 2020 to 2030. And I think what we're trying to do in events like this is to signal to you what are the things that are going to be important, that we feel that there is a reason to do that. I think there's an artistic reason for great diversity, there's a moral reason for great diversity, and for those of you running organisations, there's a business reason for great diversity as well. And we will continue to hammer those points on to you as we have conversations with you over time.
Audience diversity being something that came up, and I was wondering if Laura could, Tony Butler had asked about developing more broadly based audiences and participation. Is there any further expansion you could have on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've heard again some really interesting case studies today around the work that's happening in this area, and I think certainly, I mean, one of the interesting points that when I was talking to people about some of this work, we were kind of reflecting that we need to stop using terminology like hard to reach and maybe start talking about the easy to ignore. So there's a kind of question for us, I think, about how we truly engage with people, and often the how we do that is as important as the what we're presenting and what we're offering. Now, I think also, of course, data and technology is a really useful tool to understand our audiences and to be able to give more richness to the way in which we approach and understand that. Obviously, our customer insight toolkit we think is going to be an exciting opportunity to be able to really challenge some of that data and look forward to how we use that. But actually, I think that inclusive approach is really important, and actually from one of the No Boundaries conferences, the thing that still really resonates with me, and I'm probably going to misquote him terribly here, was but a point that John Dyer said, which was, equality is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. And I think that's the question that we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, I remember that. That was very strong, very memorable. Richard, in January, you announced your funding budgets for the rest of your investment. What does that mean for the overall picture of funding in this country?
I think the first thing to say is that the investment that we make in the national portfolio is by far the largest amount of money that we are distributing across the country. Collectively, in this room, we're investing over £408 million a year in national portfolio organisations. So that's nearly 73% of our total budget. So it's really important that we're able to make that investment work as hard as possible. Of course, we also want to make sure that we provide opportunities for other people outside of NPOs to be able to access funding. And you may be aware that we're just in the process of opening a new funding programme to replace the Grants for the Arts programme. So Arts Council National Lottery Project Grants is now open for business, and that will be an opportunity for people right across the country to apply for projects, including museums and libraries who are very welcome now to apply to those funds. We've also got a suite of development funds that we're proposing to launch in coming months, particularly including a new programme that you may have heard about recently called Developing Your Creative Practice, which is specifically aimed at individual practitioners and focused on their need for support in their own practice. So not necessarily geared towards a specific project, but more about helping them to develop their work and creating a step change in terms of what they do. Clearly, there will be limits on the amount of investment that we can make, and there'll be a lot of demand on that funding. And what we would be saying to national portfolio organisations is that we really want you to concentrate on delivering what we've already agreed with you in your funding agreement, rather than necessarily aiming to seek additional funding from those other streams, which we're really trying to target to people outside of the NPO portfolio.
Okay. What does that, we've had a number of questions though about touring and about digital development and how NPOs would access that sort of funding. Is that still open?
So what we've tried to do is to rationalise the number of funds. You may be aware that we've had quite a lot of different funding programmes over recent years, and we've tried to simplify that. So what we're saying now is that we will be closing the Strategic Touring Programme and the Ambition for Excellence Programme, and instead inviting NPOs to apply for those types of projects through the Project Grants Programme. We're ring-fencing a sum of 14 million per year for NPOs to apply for those types of projects. However, I do need to say that will be by exception, and that will need to be in addition to and very separate from the funding agreement that we already have with you, that we've already negotiated. We absolutely need to make sure that you concentrate very, very well on delivering your funding agreement that we have with you, rather than necessarily extending that to other applications that you might make to us.
Thank you. I think that's clear position. But moving on from the money for a moment, we've talked a lot today about leadership. One of the questions that was submitted from the audience was anonymously, said, how does the Arts Council, Laura, how is the Arts Council mainstreaming leadership development, training and coaching to make it more accessible to everyone?
So again, I think we've heard today about the work that we're supporting through sector support organisations, and as we've heard, do go online and look at what they may be able to offer and support in your organisation. I also think it's really important to emphasise, and as Darren says, we're reflecting this, I think, in our own organisation too, about how we would encourage you to ensure that investment in yourselves and your boards are really important. I lead a group within our own organisation. We have a kind of people and culture group which challenges us and does things like, all things you will be familiar with, like pulse surveys and reflecting on how as an organisation we're supporting our own staff. And also actually we have found very useful the Investors in People process to really challenge ourselves in terms of our whole business approach. But again, I would really ask that you kind of look at how in your organisations you're developing that support. We will be launching a number of development funds, as Richard's already highlighted, and kind of leadership and resilience and sustainabilities will be key focus of those. So there will be more announcements to come as we think through how we can best do that. But certainly I think that kind of reflection of yourselves in terms of how you support staff is really critical.
And I think I would just add to that one thing I would observe as I meet organisations across the country is those great organisations that are creating the best art, the best cultural organisations, best museums, best libraries, best sector support organisations are those that have the best leadership. So there's a huge need, I think, for us to invest in existing leaders, and that can be both executive leadership and artistic leadership, and also non-executive leadership on boards. But also, I think we want to make sure that we're doing things that invest in the next generation of leaders. So we have the very, very best opportunity to make the arts and culture sector really sing out in the 21st century.
Thank you, Darren. Richard, another for you. You've mentioned in the past, in fact, it's all of our great quest at the moment is how we can be more resilient by diversifying income streams. There have been some concerns and questions about how the funding regime might be turning art into a commercial business. The audience wants to know how the Arts Council moved grant-aided organisations into becoming more self-reliant.
I think we've already heard about that in the session this afternoon.
Yes.
Some great examples, particularly from Libraries Unlimited in Devon and some of the other projects that we heard about. Many of you are already doing this, and many of you already see that, that you maintain a mission-led approach to what you're doing. But in order to sustain that mission, you need to become more entrepreneurial and you need to think about other ways of generating income. So I don't think this is a new thing. Certainly at the Arts Council, we're here to support that process by opening doors and providing new opportunities. We've got a new small team led by my colleague Francis Runacres, who will be there to try to identify new ways in which we can generate enterprise and innovation with you. But I think it's just something that is already happening, and we want to continue to support that process.
Okay, thank you. Darren again. Again about smaller organisations, but how do small diverse flagship organisations influence and collaborate with larger, less diverse organisations to create symbiotic learning relationships and enable the collective creative futures to flourish? No name against that one either.
Sort of question you get asked in Starbucks every day, isn't it?
I know, I could barely read it.
I think that the really important thing, that one of the things we did with the new portfolio is the banding. So we've got three bands, and actually we're asking the bigger organisations that have a greater investment of public money to do a bit more to support smaller organisations. Hopefully at the same time, smaller organisations, the administrative requirements that we place on them has lessened. And I think one of the things that's really important is, and I think we should say this all the way through, and I will keep hammering this home, and I know it's something that Nick said this morning, we do exist to enable great art to happen, to enable great cultural organisations. So although here we're talking in this session very much about some of the instrumentalist things that we do in the Arts Council, we are the Arts Council, and I want to reassure people that the creative excellence is absolutely the first thing we want to do. And I think big organisations can help that to happen in their locality, in their art form, by being quite generous of spirit. I think an organisation I would look at who does that extremely well would be Battersea Arts Centre. We saw David earlier, and I think there's some really interesting models of how they co-curate and how they put an arm around smaller and newer organisations, and also around individual artists as well. We've got a whole bank of sector support organisations, some of whom will not be that familiar to you, and one of the jobs we want to do is to make sure you're aware of those. So people, for example, like the Association of Cultural Enterprises, who have been working in the museum sector about how they commercialise their shops, etc., may well work in other parts of what we do in concert halls and galleries and things like that. So we're really keen to make sure that you have all of those organisations providing service and support to you. So I think what I want to reassure you on is we're not expecting you to go out on your own and plough every furrow on your own. We are there to be supportive, and there is this network of organisations to help you achieve that.
Okay, thank you. Richard, we had quite a number of questions that were submitted to the panel on the topic of cultural education and engagement with children and young people, quite a hot topic. Specifically though on cultural education, can you tell us who is challenging the government on its current education strategy? And what message, not just that, but what message should the Arts Council and all of the NPO group be sending to government about this?
It's great, isn't it, that nearly 90% of NPOs have signed up to work in this area, that children and young people are really important to so many of the organisations that you work with. So clearly it's a subject that's close to many of our hearts, and we absolutely need to work together to make sure that it's firmly on the agenda for the government. The encouraging thing, I think, is that we heard from the Minister this morning that he sees that cultural education is really important, and we know that we have a Secretary of State in Matt Hancock who also thinks that cultural education is really important. So one of the things that we all need to do is to work with DCMS to help to make sure that that message gets across to their colleagues in the Department for Education. But the other thing that I think I would say is that it's also about change at the grassroots level as well. Where children experience culture is often first at school. And it's really about the inspiring leadership of many head teachers and other teachers in schools, where we can start to see that change. The education system isn't prohibitive in terms of creative and cultural education. What the measurement regime does is it can skew the way that schools are operating. But we're starting to see courageous teachers and head teachers really doing fantastic work at a local level. I was in a session organised by one of our bridge organisations, the Mighty Creatives, yesterday, and a school based in the Amber Valley in Derbyshire. Shout out for St John's Catholic Primary School in Ripley. Interestingly, Ripley was described as the most working class town in England. And they've taken the arts to the heart of their curriculum. They're all about the arts, and this is filtering across the whole school. So a really courageous set of teachers doing some fantastic work locally. And it's really that inspiring action that we can start to see that schools can do this, as well as taking the message to government.
Thank you. Thanks very much. We are running out of time, so I'm skipping to the last question, which does mean we're not asking the Brexit questions. I'm really sorry about that. But finally, Darren, you've talked a lot about moving into the next 10-year strategy. Looking ahead, what is the area of focus? What are the headline challenges? Probably Brexit. And how do you think that your new Arts Council strategy will actually assist artists as well as organisations to address these challenges?
I think that to reassure you that on all of these levels we continue to advocate very strongly to government. So to echo what Rich is saying, cultural education in school, out of school remains very, very important to us. It's very important to our chair. So Nick, as you know, has set up the Darren Commission on creativity in education. We're also doing a very long-form piece of research in Leicester around a 25-year creative talent plan. And we really continue to make that case very strongly to government as to the importance of that and the importance of it for our society, which I think is very important, having creativity and creative people, but also there is a very strong creative industries argument as well. You know, we know this is a fast-growing sector. We know that actually studying subjects like music and dance and drama and art and design are very, very important for that. Whether you work in the creative industries or whether you go on to just be great human beings, you need to have those subjects and that knowledge in your life. And I think that's something that's interesting around the sort of people who get that education and being able to be insiders and being able to have a conversation and a seat at the table of influence in this country. And I think that's something that we would also see as being really, really important. Creativity, I think, will be at the heart of what we do. And we started to talk about it today. I think we'll talk about it more over the next 10 years. There'll be some very strong things that we want to signal, I think, going forward around diversity. We've also talked about data, and I think it's very, very important that the organisations that we invest in are just as good at using data and have just as great access to data as commercial organisations to enable them to make better artistic decisions. We know that digital and new technology will be really, really important, and I think it will be a strong belongs to, it will be unlikely that we would not be signalling that every one of our organisations should be a multi-platform content provider, content creator come 2020 to 2030. And then I think there's this question around distribution. How are we going to build the audiences and the practitioners of tomorrow, but also how are we going to make sure that we're reflecting everybody in this country's art and culture? It's a conversation. We've not got the answers yet. We're very, very keen to actually talk to you and to hear from you, and that's the process that we're going through over the next 18 months or so.
How do we do that if we want to feed in?
So there's a website right now which you can come onto, and there's a conversation there. We have a lot of groups around the country, but also I think one of the things that's very interesting, and one of the challenges that we might put to ourselves collectively, the Arts Council and ourselves in this room, is we're very good at talking to ourselves and sometimes less good at talking to other people. So we're actually actively going out there and engaging with people who we don't usually talk to and we don't usually hear from to understand what they want from art and culture. And I think that's something that's very, very important for us. We want to be audience-focused and not just producer-focused, and I think that's something that's very important.
That's great, thank you. Any final words from any of the panel? Because I can see the clock. All right, thank you for your candour and honesty and for your response to the questions. And I'd like to thank Darren, Laura and Richard. Thank you very much.